Good afternoon, School Nation. It's about 3:15 Central Standard Time if you're a fellow Minnesotan. If not, whatever time it is, hope you're doing well. I believe it's been 2 weeks since you've heard from Mike on the Vikes, so here I am. Week 1 was the 4th, week after was a vacation, and you'd be surprised at how hard it is to squeeze this in. So thanks for your patience. I'm sure you were struggling without your weekly mic on the Vikes. And also shout out to content creators everywhere because it is harder than it would appear at times for people to constantly get content out there consistently, and that's good content and things like that. So anyway, welcome back. It's been a couple weeks. Again, you can find me at jlimate on Twitter, MikeOnTheVikes.com, or on Facebook, Mike on the Vikes as well. There's not been a lot of writing because I'm doing a lot more of this. However, BitesizeSports.com is a website I write a blog for, and they have a lot of good coverage of general NFL, NBA, combat sports, and then also, if you're nerding out and watching new Star Wars series, those types of things as well. So make sure you go over to Bite Size Sports as well. But anyway, welcome back. A couple news and notes. The first one is really depressing, actually. I was on vacation. I got a notification that Kyrie Jackson passed away. Vikings 4th-round draft pick this year. One of those what type of deal moments where you're just like, is that an actual notification? What are the odds? How terrible? Apparently he was in a car accident. Some other car struck the car he was riding in. He was a passenger, and him and two of his friends from high school, or all three of them were killed. I think he was pronounced dead at the scene. I don't have all the details. I'm not going to make any speculations on things like that. I'm just here to say my condolences to whoever knew Kyrie Jackson, and I just feel so bad for him and for his family. I mean, I had a few weeks ago posted a video about how I was excited he was on the team. I was lauding him for, kind of going away from football. He was working some other jobs. He worked his way back into football, and now he was about to get his shot in the NFL, and he was cut short. He was only 24 years old. So really sad to see that he passed. I feel terrible, and I hope that him, his family, and friends can move on as best they can after. It's a tragedy, and there's no other way to kind of sugarcoat it. So my sincere condolences to Kyrie Jackson and his family. So I wanted to start with that. I know a lot of people have been kind of probably saying things about that as well. I've been seeing some posts and articles about that. It's just a huge bummer. It's the only way to say it. All reports out of camp, not that it matters. You never want a 24-year-old to have to lose their life, but on top of it all, he was already developing a name for himself at Vikings camp as being a positive presence, right? Smiling, saying hello, being excited to be around the game, being ready to play football. And so it's just I just feel so bad for him and his family. So again, my condolences. And so I wanted to start with that because that is kind of the A topic right now still for Purple Nation, reminding us that football players are humans and you got to put football aside sometimes when things happen like that. So I feel really bad, and I hope that, I hope his family's able to find some sort of way to move on after. Obviously, their lives will be changed forever, but, hopefully... Yeah, I don't know. I guess probably should stop talking. I'm not saying anything that's beneficial right now. So again, my sincerest condolences to Kyrie Jackson's family. I then wanted to switch to a ridiculous topic to try to shift the mood a little bit because unfortunately we can't say anything that would change what happened with him. Netflix has posted a new series called Receiver on the heels of the successful quarterback series, and our own Justin Jefferson is being featured in this documentary as well. So now in both documentaries, a Vikings player has been featured. That's kind of interesting. I wonder if we're no longer flyover country. So now it's time to get that Super Bowl championship for our resume as well. And I haven't watched the whole series yet. I've only watched I watched the first episode, and then Jefferson's in the second episode. And what I find out is he's a candy addict, and that is awesome news for me. If anyone in my my family, friends, coworkers that knows anything about me knows that I have strong candy opinions. And if you didn't know that about me, that just means that we haven't gotten to the topic yet. But when we do, rest assured, I don't hold anything back. I feel like it's a safe enough topic. Can't really offend anybody with a candy opinion, and so I go pretty hard. I have some very unpopular takes. I like to consider myself a candy expert, and so when I'm sitting here watching Justin Jefferson pull out his Sour Patch Kids and looking at his, jars of varieties of candy that he's eating, and he admits, he's like, it's not good for my health, but I'm only 25. I'm a young kid. I can still eat this stuff, and hopefully, and then he goes right into his personal chef that's making him healthy food. So he's fine, Vikings fans. Calm down. He's not going to try to use the candy diet to survive the NFL. But I thought that was pretty humorous because I'm also a candy expert. So if I don't know if I could have liked Justin Jefferson more than I already did, but if it's possible, I definitely like him even more now. So, maybe someday he and I will get to sit down and have a candy debate. I think that would be pretty hilarious. So, that's the lighthearted news of the day. Is for me, it was news to me that he was such a that he's kind of a candy nut, sweet tooth type of guy. So that was kind of cool. All right, those are the couple of news items for today. The topic for today is everyone's favorite topic, everyone's most interesting topic, and that is your Minnesota Vikings offensive line. Some of you started to giggle when I said that. Offensive linemen don't necessarily get in the limelight very often unless they're really bad, unless they get called for holding at key moments, unless they give up an obvious sack, etc., etc. And so otherwise, they're just the guys that people expect to do that work, and it's a hard job. The trenches are where football games are won and lost. You can win games with a good offensive line, and they can definitely lose you games as well. And so I'll start with the reason why I decided to do this episode. I was perusing the social media internets, as I often do, like the rest of the world, and I found Fantasy Index website had posted a really cool graphic. I'm not saying I agree with it perfectly, but it's a clean graphic, and I'm not going to show it to you because it's theirs. But if you want to go to the Fantasy Index Facebook page, that's where I found it. Basically, they ranked the 32 NFL teams' offensive lines, and then they gave each player highlighted a different color. And their scale was all-pro candidate, above average, average, probably below average, and then definitely below average. And so, naturally, I was curious to see where our Vikings offensive linemen ranked, and they just did the starting five, or what I would assume is the projected starting five. Again, we're not even into training camp yet, so things can change. Players could come in. We have our own. It's a good time to point that out, I suppose. We have our own kind of guard battle. I've mentioned Dalton Risner, Blake Brandel. I'm not sure we'll know exactly who's starting. Right now it's listed as Risner, so I'm going to run with that for now, but everything's subject to change at this time of the year, as we should know. And you'll be happy to know that none of the Vikings offensive line starting were at definitely below average. So that's, I guess, something good. We had the 20th ranked offensive line overall. I think that's a little low, actually. However, when I was kind of looking into some things and getting some notes ready for what I was going to talk about today, I think 20 is almost kind of correct. I think we have enough to work on where we're not like a top 10 offensive line. I think we have a couple top 10 players who I'll talk about in a second. But then definitely we're not in the bottom third. I know that for sure as well, or I feel like I know that for sure as well. So I think 20th is a little low. I would say we're between 15 and 20 if I were to make my own rankings. Maybe even between like 12 and 18. I could commit to that as well. But anyway, rankings are rankings, right? So Fantasy Index is one site, and so I'm going to post what they said about our starting five on my favorite way to do technology here. Ooh, a text box. Sorry, podcast listeners, you're just going to have to hear it again. You can't see the bland font on my YouTube screen. So according to Fantasy Index, our highest, of course, is Christian Darrisaw, but he got above average. I already disagreed with that. I think he's an all-pro candidate. What I talk about today, notwithstanding, because I watched some film and he didn't impress me in his run blocking, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But again, I still think that when he's healthy, he has all-pro candidate written all over him. I think that there's some things we could do to encourage that, and I think he does need to stay healthy to really ascend to that level. Dalton Risner, our left guard, was listed as below average. I think that's fair, honestly. I think there's a reason why he was a late signee. All the things I referenced when I talked about when he was signed. He's a good pass blocker. He doesn't do much in the run game, so he's kind of a one-trick pony, etc. And there's got to be a reason why teams aren't fighting for his services. Offensive line depth is essential, and he was available for a long time. And so I don't know the full story there, but what I do know is I think below average has to be fair. Garrett Bradbury as average is perfectly fair. I've said this on this podcast. I've said this to other people. Garrett Bradbury is fine. He's not amazing, but he's not bad. I think if he was a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit quicker, I think there are some things he could do to really take the next step to being above average, but the fact of the matter is he's just a decent center. There's no reason to move off of him unless he somehow was commanding an egregious contract. But at the same time, he's not perfect, right? We have interior pressure issues in Minnesota. We've had them for years, and he's been a part of our team for years. So I think average is a fair ranking there. Ed Ingram being below average, I think sadly that's also fair. I think we drafted him with the idea that he could blossom into something above average. And I think as a run blocker, he could. I'm really starting to lose faith in him as an average to above average pass blocking guard, and so we'll talk about that. I'm going to kind of reference these things later on as well. And then Brian O'Neill was listed as average. I thought that was a little bit of a slight on Brian O'Neill. I think he's definitely at least in the above average discussion. Because our tackle duo has been really good. And so I saw this graphic that I'm not going to show you, but again, Fantasy Index Facebook is where I was looking at it, and it inspired me to do some discussions on the Vikings offensive line. So I'm going to go through kind of what I did. I looked at a little film from one game in particular, and then I'll tell you why I think it matters when we get to the end. And if you can hear my dog barking, I apologize. That's not something I can fix right now. So anyway, I think what I ended up doing was I looked at the Chicago Bears game in Minnesota during Week 12. It was a game we lost 12-10. Everyone hated watching that game. It was Monday Night Football, and it was simply it was really bad to watch because we had Justin Fields throwing no passes more than like 3 yards down the field, and we had a Vikings offense that was led by Josh Dobbs. We didn't have Justin Jefferson. We just could not do a thing. And so it was a kind of a poor game. But the trenches played a pretty significant role in this game. And the reason I chose to look at this game in particular is because the Bears are a divisional opponent, right? The Bears, we play them twice a year, so it's good to know how you stack up against your own division. Not to mention, the Bears' defense was really good last year, and I think projects to be even better this year. And so while they're not the best defense in the league, I think they definitely have a top 10 potential as a defense, and so you want to know how your team stacks up against the best. And the other reason I chose this game to kind of look in depth at is because it was a game where all five of our projected offensive line starters played 100% of the offensive snaps. It was just as I have it listed up there. It was from left to right tackle to right tackle. We had Christian Darrisaw, Dalton Risner, Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram, and Brian O'Neill. And so they all five played together. It was against a divisional opponent who we'll see twice this year, and it's a good defense to kind of test your mettle against, so to speak. So I looked at this game, and honestly, it wasn't anything super alarming or super shocking or surprising. I think the tape backed up the PFF grades, because that's what I did. I watched the All-22 of the Bears-Vikings Week 12 matchup, and then I looked at kind of the PFF grades for each player, and everything kind of followed the pattern or the trend of what we kind of know about these guys right now, right? And Dalton Risner, for example, had the worst run blocking grade, according to PFF, in this game, but he was better than Ed Ingram and Brian O'Neill in the pass blocking game, the pass protection game. And that's one of the things we've talked about on this podcast, right? Risner is a consistently decent pass blocker. He doesn't offer as much in the run game, and so that's something that we have to be factoring in as we go into this season. And again, it's not just me that said that. In fact, a lot of the stuff that I say is based off of what I hear from other people and combining it with my own eye test to make sure that what I'm saying doesn't sound completely outlandish. And so, if we looked at all the grades for that game, the best pass blocking grade, of course, was Christian Darrisaw, followed by Dalton Risner. So Darrisaw had a 72.6, Risner had a 69, Bradbury had 66.9, and then what we know about Ed Ingram, he was a 55.9, and then Brian O'Neill actually was the worst of the offensive linemen in pass blocking, according to PFF, with 44.7. Again, by the way, I'm not going to sit here and say that PFF grades are everything and that they're perfect, but when they back up what you're seeing on the field, you can kind of see some of the things that make sense about it, so I hope that makes sense. I'm not going to say that we're just going to look at PFF grades from here on out. But I thought that was interesting. And then from a run blocking standpoint, like I mentioned, it was kind of reversed, right? So Brian O'Neill led the way, 82.3 run blocking grade. Garrett Bradbury and Josh Oliver, by the way, who we'll mention later, had second was 75, and Ingram 69.9, and then the run blocking grade for Darrisaw was way down at 55, and Reisner was at 40.3. And so what I kind of pulled from this, it's like, and again, I'm not breaking any news. I'm kind of just doing an assessment here of our offensive line or our projected starters because I'm a little worried, and I'll talk about that later going into the season. But it's almost like the left side of our line is our pass protecting offensive linemen, and the right side of our lines are run blocking. And that would be great if we could somehow only run to the right side and only pass, quote unquote, to the left side. But we can't. You need the whole unit to be a part of your offense. You need the whole unit to be doing things that make sense. And so when I looked at the All-22, some of the highlights, again, everything kind of backed up what the grades have said and what people have been saying online. There were some reps where Darrisaw and Reisner looked real rough. Slow off the ball somehow, even though they know the snap count. Darrisaw gets beat to points at various times, which is weird. Again, I said he's an all-pro candidate, so I don't know if it was injury. I don't know if it was scheme. I don't know if it was, random lack of effort on random plays, things like that. But there were some reps where he didn't quite get where he needed to go. Dalton Reisner, you can see he's always looking for someone to block, but he almost looks a little bit too much. And there was one where he didn't have someone right over him, and so he immediately goes to the second level, but if he doesn't get the right guy, it's kind of weird. And so there were some reps that just didn't go very well, again, from my standpoint. Again, I'm not saying here, I'm saying I'm an expert on run blocking or anything, or running pass blocking or anything like that. And you also have to factor in scheme. There were some times where the play was just a better play call on defense. There was one play where the run went outside of the right tackle, and you have C.J. Ham trying to block 3 Chicago Bears defenders who are untouched. And so I don't think that many guys missed their read on that play. I think that's just a play call that was just better for the Bears in that sense than it was for the Vikings. And so make sure I wanted to, as I was watching this too, these are some of my notes. I was like, I want to make sure I factor that in, right? Another thing to factor in, this was a Josh Dobbs-led offense with Justin Jefferson out. And so if you're the Bears scheming for us, when your best receiver is rookie Jordan Addison and your quarterback is a known scrambler like Josh Dobbs, you can account for that. And it was pretty apparent in this game. Again, if you forgot which game I'm talking about, this is Week 12, home against the Bears, the 12-10 loss on Monday Night Football. The Bears had time to scheme for Dobbs, and it looked like their defense was ready and our offense didn't have what it took to overcome that. And so again, just things I was writing down to make sure I didn't completely dismantle our offensive line, because it didn't look good at times, but I don't think we were as bad as some of these things would suggest. But I said regardless, Bradbury and Ingram, and especially Ed Ingram, holding their blocks in pass pro is a huge problem. I think Bradbury is less of a worry because we know what he is, we know how he's played, we know he's going to make some mistakes here and there, but that he's also going to generally be in the right spot and for the most part hold his own. Ed Ingram is still a worry for me in pass protection. He seems to always be losing the rep, and so he's big enough to be in the way, but it feels like at times it's only a matter of time and a very short amount of time before his guy is going to get to the quarterback. And so, I think that's a big issue that I noticed in this game in particular that would, again, back up some of the things we've been talking about, right, or that we know. Ed Ingram is good in the run game. His pass protection, I don't know if it's gotten better. What is it, going on his 4th year now, I believe, and so that's a problem that we have to look into a little bit. Other notes I had, we actually looked pretty good running up the middle. Our runs in between the tackles I thought were pretty effective, especially when we had 12 personnel. When we had Hawkinson and Josh Oliver on the field, there's one player in particular where they move to one side, they both get set up on the other side before the cadence starts, and I think Ty Chandler had like a 6, 7, 8-yard run on that play. It just felt smooth. It felt like we were ready to push the pile forward. And then my other note here, I already mentioned it, but it looks like we have the left side of our line is for pass blocking and the right side of our line is for run blocking, but you can't just do that. You need to have a line that can do everything to a certain extent. So I'm going to run with that idea on the 12 personnel because I did, if you're listening to this, if you forgot how I started this, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, what's the point of all this? This is just stuff that we know about the Vikings offensive line. And I guess for me, what it all means is, on one hand, I wanted to confirm what I knew, right? Like, sometimes you have some analysis as fans and we make these statements about our players, but maybe we haven't analyzed it as much recently, and maybe things have changed. We haven't really taken the time to look in depth. And so that's why I was like, hey, I'm going to pick a game that was, week 12. The Bears were turning into a really, really good defense. It's a divisional opponent. The Vikings will see all of our projected starters played. I was like, this might be a good little snapshot for me. I didn't have time to watch the all 22s for all the games, right? I'm probably find time to go back and do more of them down the road. And, some of this analysis might change, but when what I see backs up what I've heard and what I've seen in the past and what things like PFF grades are saying, and the fantasy index rankings, where I wasn't 100% in agreement with them, I at least know that they weren't super far off, right? They weren't like completely outlandish. And so what it all means to me is, kind of picked three things. It's kind of the general thing to do, I suppose. Well, one, the worry is real. Not the struggle, because I don't think our offensive line is struggling necessarily, but there's a lot of worry there. And the worry is based in the fact that our starting 5 offensive linemen are good, not great. And you can see number 2, their depth is good, and our depth is good, not great. And so, we've seen what happens in the past when you have a significant Darrisaw injury, or just in general, we're not as elite as we might need to be. You've heard me say before, you've probably read some things I said about our running game has to be better this year. And the worry for me, in addition to the injury factor, is I don't know if we have enough to keep this running game moving forward. We need to run the ball more. I don't care if it's not pretty all the time. I don't care if we have some 3 and outs because we're trying to run too much. I think we need to run the ball more. And I'm worried. I'm worried that our offensive line isn't going to be capable of that. And so it'll be interesting to see during camp how Reisner looks at left guard, maybe even if Blake Brandel is proving that he's going to be much more effective of a run-blocking guard. I mean, who knew the trade or losing Ezra Cleveland was going to be a huge deal, right? I still don't. I'm not saying it's a major deal right now, but we did know he was a really good run blocker, right? And he could play that left guard spot. And so that's the worry is real. Maybe not the struggle. I think our starting 5 are solid enough to go into the season with, that we don't have to panic. But I think the worry is real for how effective we can be, especially in the run blocking game. Pass blocking game, the worry is real in terms of this interior pressure. Are we going to have to throw 45 quick passes to get the ball off before our quarterbacks get sacked because Ingram gets beat every play? I don't know. That's the worry. The depth I do think is good. I mean, we still have David Quesenberry, Blake Brandel, I've said a few times already, coming back from last year. We drafted a couple players. Walter Rouse, the tackle, was interesting to me. He played almost exclusively left tackle. I think he had 1 snap in the past 3 years at a different part of the offensive line. And so, if we're hoping for versatility out of him, we're not going to get it. But what it does appear is that Walter Rouse could slot in as the guy that does help us in the event of a Darrisaw injury, right? Can Walter Rouse come in and give us decent left tackle play for 4 weeks, something like that, right? His footwork's pretty slow. He's not necessarily going to be an elite starter in the NFL at left tackle at any given time, but I think he can offer us some depth. And so I feel okay about our depth. I just think our starting ceiling is a little bit lower, partially due to because now we know what these guys are, right? And since we're essentially running it back with these 5, at least at the moment, again, training camp, someone could rise to the crop. Michael Juergens, the center rookie we drafted, right? Levi Jake Rodriguez, like, who knows who could step in and all of a sudden, change it up a little bit. But if this is who we're running it back with, again, it's all good, not great, right? It's good, it's not great. And so that's something to look into and be, as a fan, we like to figure out, well, what are we watching for in the preseason? I don't like the preseason. I think I get too attached to players. I think I mentioned this before. I get too attached to players who don't make the team. It never means anything, so who knows what you can really take from it. But one thing I will be looking at is, comments on the website, highlights of the website, things about certain offensive linemen maybe getting some notoriety, maybe rising up the ranks. We'll see. Because right now, CBSSports.com has our depth chart as those same 5 offensive linemen started the Week 12 game against the Bears I've been referencing. You have Walter Rouse, initially, and Quessenberry as backup tackles. You have Dan Feeney, who we brought in as backup center, followed by Michael Juergens. And then you have, Blake Brandel, who I mentioned, and things like that, and some other guys as well. And so the depth, I think, is good, not great. And it could be better, sure, but I don't know what our options are right now. We'd have to double-check who's still available. And then the last thing up here in terms of what does it all mean is scheme, baby, scheme. So, by the way, if you're listening on the podcast, I didn't differentiate those first 2 points. First thing that it all means is that the worry's real. The second one, I did have depth is good. I feel like our depth is okay. It's good. It's decent. How many times can I say that? It just doesn't feel exciting, but I don't feel panicked about it, if that makes sense. And then the third thing about what it all means is scheme, baby. Oh, and more 12 personnel. So what that means is I really think that this is going to be a trying year for Kevin O'Connell. I think that if this offense is successful, I think we can put him on the lists of maybe not coach of the year. That's a little bit extreme. But I do think he's going to need to scheme his A game throughout the whole season, right? Last year, I'm going to give him kind of a pass because he had some moments of brilliance with Josh Dobbs. Obviously, the Atlanta game, no prep, and somehow he called the perfect game with Josh Dobbs, right? But then, we beat the Raiders 3-0. We lose to the Bears 12-10. But he had backup quarterbacks, right? And so I'm saying I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass on that. Like, that's a lot to have to deal with your second year as a coach. And so not going to hold it against him. But this year, I think if we have consistency at quarterback, right, if our starter stays healthy, whether it's Darnold or McCarthy, we can't have games where we try to win 3-0. We can't lose to the Bears 12-10 in a game where their offense was really just boring, right? You have to be able to put up points. And so what does it all mean? He needs to use his offensive line in the right scheme, right? We need to run up the middle more, right? We need to put our guys in better situations. For example, I want to see a lot more bootlegs out to the left, right? Because, again, like I said, you can't just run to the right. And so how do you disguise that? How do you make it seem like we're doing that when it's been happening and then you swing out Darnold or McCarthy off to the left, right? I want to see some of those types of things. And then 12 personnel, I really like when I see Oliver and Hockenson on the field at the same time because you still have Addison and Justin Jefferson, and we're assuming Jordan Addison's taking the next step. So you have the best receiver, and then you have one who could potentially be elite in the next year or two. You don't need to necessarily always have 3 receivers out there, especially when TJ Hockenson is one of the best receiving tight ends in the game. And you brought Josh Oliver in last year to be a blocker. And so if our offensive line needs that extra body in there, right, needs that extra body for a good combo block, like do that. Get him on the field. Do that more consistently to create some holes for Ty Chandler. And then again, part of the scheme too hopefully could be if you're running up the middle, it's not going to be exciting. Yeah, you might get 4 or 5 yards here and there. But if you can do that consistently, I know Mike on the Vikes here is going to be very happy about that, right? And that's going to help quell my fear, my worry about this offensive line. But anyway, I hope that all made sense. Again, this is how we plan Mike on the Vikes. It's whatever gets me whatever piques my interest at any given time. And that offensive line ranking was pretty curious. So I'd say definitely go check that out. I don't know anybody at Fantasy Index, by the way. I'm not trying to plug their site or anything, but it's a nice graphic, and I think it's generally pretty accurate, or at least with sound analysis. And so I think the Vikings were a little bit underrated, but also probably fair when I really think about it. So anyway, if we are indeed running it back with these 5 guys, Christian Darrisaw, Dalton Reisner, Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram, and Brian O'Neill, we are looking at a very average offensive line. And so we need to scheme that in the best way possible, Kevin O'Connell, because all we need is enough time and space for our position players, and we'll be golden on offense. So anyway, if you like offensive line talk, hopefully that was interesting to you. If you don't like offensive line talk, I'm sorry, but you're probably not still listening anymore. So people on YouTube appreciate for checking it out, and people on the podcast appreciate for checking it out as well. Again, you can find me on X at JLime8 if you have other offensive line information or tidbits that you want to share with me. Otherwise, this is me signing off. It's July 12th. I'll see you next week, and I think that'll be after the first day or right around the first day of training camp. So football is officially almost here, folks. Skol to the bowl. Later.